Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Women in Publishing Summit, where we are bringing together women from across the globe with just enormously dynamic backgrounds in the publishing, writing, editing, graphic design arenas, any place basically to help us write, publish, and sell our books better. Today we have Lisa Lepki. She's the head of marketing and editor of the Pro Writing Aid blog. Pro Writing Aid is our silver sponsor this year, so we are so happy to have them on board so that we can bring all of this to you guys. Lisa is a serious word nerd, as well as the head of marketing at Pro Writing Aid. With over 15 years experience in writing, marketing, and PR, she sometimes loves the technical elements of writing more than the writing itself. Lisa is the co-author of 20 editing tips from professional writers, the novel writing training plan, and Creating Legends, How to Craft Characters Readers Adore. And she's currently working on her first novel. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Her writing can be found on Writer's Digest, bookbaby.com, The Writing Cooperative, The Write Life, DIY Author, and many other sites for writers. Not only is that a great list of places to be, but it's a great list of resources for writers. So you should check, if you're new to this and looking for ways to expand your writing, you should check out those sites too. But start with Pro Writing Aid, because you guys have a pretty hefty blog, don't you, with all kinds of tips and resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's my favorite part of the job, really. We've got a team of writers, of bloggers that are from all over the world, really, that contribute, and they write about, some of them are fiction writers and they write about that. Some of them are copywriters. Some of them are just grammar nerds like me. We have some teachers that talk about how to use it for education. And I love it. We try and put a new article up there, if not every day, then every other day. And so we've just got this huge archive of resources now.
That's awesome. I know you guys are working on a couple of new ebooks as well to help writers. When will those be available? And are they going to be free on your website, or how is that working?
Well, they're going to be free for people attending your summit.
Awesome.
But generally, most of our ebooks are part of the premium subscription for Pro Writing Aid. So if you become one of our premium users, you get access to our we have a whole library of ebooks, and we've got 2 more coming out. One is called How to Build Your Author Platform, which Alexa contributed an amazing chapter for.
Thank you.
And another one called How to Take Your Draft and turn it into a manuscript and publish, which is all about whether or not you should be using traditional publishing or self-publishing, and the pros and cons to each of them. So yeah, we're just trying to create all the resources we can think of that will be useful for writers who want to get their ideas out there.
That's fantastic. Well, let's back up just a little bit and talk about what Pro Writing Aid is, and all the things to it, how it started, who it's for, etc.
Sure. So Pro Writing Aid is an editing tool that writers use to help them copy edit more effectively. It won't help you fix your narrative or your plot holes or your character inconsistencies, but it's all about tightening up your writing and making it as clear and strong as possible so that your writing doesn't get in the way of your ideas. Mm-hmm. And it was started by a guy called Chris Banks, who's a writer as well, and but he's also a bit of a computer nerd. Mm-hmm. And so he'd written his first book, but most of his experience had been in professional writing. And so there was one winter where he broke his leg and he was living in France. And so he was stuck in his room, and to keep himself from going crazy, he wrote some basic algorithms just to help him find things in his own writing to make them better. And then he just put a free version up on the website, and just in case it was useful for anyone else. And then all of a sudden people started using it all the time, and he just sort of grew. He got all these users and he didn't really know where they came. And so then he did a bit more on it, and then more users came, and then it just grew from that. And now we're coming up on 1 million users now.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's only 4 years ago, I guess. Maybe 5 years ago that he broke his leg. Yeah. So that's how it all began. It all started with a writer who wanted to improve their writing.
So do you all still offer a free version, or are there only subscription levels, and what are the differences between those?
No, most of our users use our free version. So the free the free subscription, users can access our editing tool on the website. The web editor is sort of our most comprehensive version, although they're all, I shouldn't say that now that we've put out some new versions and they're all more or less the same. The only thing that you can't do when you're a free user is you can't edit more than 500 words at a time. And you don't get access to our software integration. So we have integrations with Microsoft Word and Scrivener and Google Docs and a Chrome extension and all of that. So all of those things sort of allow you to edit wherever you write.
Nice.
Yeah, but if you're on a bit of a budget, then the free version is always going to be there.
Yeah. Okay, so for people, so there's also Grammarly, which is a popular tool for people to use. Can you explain the difference between ProWritingAid and Grammarly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Grammarly is great. Grammarly is really fantastic. The difference between us and them, I would say, is they're really focused on grammar and finding errors. They target a lot of English as a second language writers, whereas we have that. We have the grammar and spelling side of things, but we want to go a lot more in depth. We look at a lot more style issues. We look at a lot more of the writing techniques that that help writers that aren't about grammar. I mean, you and I both know that you can have something that's completely grammatically correct and still be
terrible
written poorly. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of things that an editing tool can find quite easily that are sort of flags of amateurish writing. And so that's where we focus.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great tool. Last year, ProWritingAid was also a sponsor, and they gave away some free licenses, and we were able to get one and use it. And I actually did use it with our compilation. I did an anthology book. Well, I use it for more than this, but this is a great example. I had an anthology. It was our third Lose the Cape book, and it was all about Ain't Nothing But a Teen Thing is the subtitle. So it's all about parents who are getting ready to have teens and preteens, but we received a bunch of essays from people with completely different writing styles. And I found it so useful for popping it in the tool, and just like things like, you've used the word someday 56 times in this essay. You know, you might not necessarily pick up on those things. I mean, sometimes if it's really, really obvious, sometimes you will, but there are other words that are less obvious, or it would say things like, you know, you've started 7 sentences with besides that, or whatever, you know, whatever it was, which I found really, really helpful in taking good essays to great essays, you know, being able, and then the word suggestions, and of course the grammar stuff. But it was really, really helpful to me, and I just thought it was great. And it does have a lot more bells and whistles than Grammarly. So if you're trying to get essays to the next level, you know, then and explaining things, I like that too. That if I didn't understand if it came back and said, I'm just going to pick out a word because I don't remember anything about grammar, but if it's like, so this is not going to make any sense, but if that was a conjunction that shouldn't have been a conjunction or whatever, you know, and you don't know what a conjunction is, it would explain, you can click, and I found that to be very, very, very useful, or why you wouldn't. Anyway, I have a hard time like recalling specific things, but I just remember thinking, this is awesome. I'm getting such a great education in how to form a sentence well, and how to write a better, a more appealing sentence, and all that kind of stuff. So I found it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of those things that every writer has their own turns of phrase that they like, and that they use over and over and over again, and they don't hear it.
Right.
And words like suddenly, if you use suddenly more than once a chapter, it sounds weird. It sounds like everything can be suddenly. Yeah, the things just happen in order, but everything isn't suddenly.
Right.
So, I mean, one of the things that computers are good at is counting, and so they can go through an entire chapter and say, hey, you've used suddenly 16 times here. Whereas when you're just reading it, you're looking at it sentence by sentence or paragraph by paragraph, those sorts of things may not occur to you. Right. Especially if you like those sorts of words and you keep using them.
Yeah, I thought it was super helpful, and it really did make a big difference in our essays and just taking them to the next level up, which obviously if we're writing books, we want our our writing to be the next level up. We don't want anyone to buy our book and the first comment to be, oh, this writing sucks, you know?
Yeah, of course. And I feel like so often really good ideas just get lost because the writing isn't great. I mean, I feel like you lose credibility in a writer if there's errors, or if it just sounds clunky, or if you can't quite follow them, or if you have to stop and look up a word that they've used because it's a weird word that they found in their thesaurus. And all of those things get in the way of your reader getting your idea or your story or your argument or whatever it is that you're trying to get across.
Absolutely. So is the tool good enough that it could be used in substitution of a live editor?
We get that a lot. That's one of the comments that we get on social media a lot, is people saying your tool will never replace an editor. And I mean, we absolutely agree. Absolutely. What we find is that editors actually really like our tool. A lot of them are asking their writers to run their articles or their manuscripts through ProWritingAid before they submit it, before they send it in, so that it's tighter. Because editors, like professional editors, they're not really interested in fixing grammar errors. True. They're not really interested in looking at your passive voice. They don't want to fix that sort of stuff. They want to get at the meat. They want to look at your story and your plot holes and whether you're saying things and whether it's too much backstory and those meaty things. Right. But they don't want to. And if you're submitting your writing to someone who hasn't read anything from you before, and it's full of amateurish writing, they're not going to get past the first paragraph. I mean, I get submissions all the time, probably 20 a week for the ProWritingAid blog, and I'd say 80% of them, I barely get past the first page because people haven't taken the care. Even if the ideas are great, if they haven't taken the care, I don't have the time or the inclination really to go through and spend a lot of time fixing it. So I expect writers to send in tight, polished articles, manuscripts, whatever it is, if I'm going to consider using them.
Well, and that's such a great point, because even with, like, say you're on the traditional publishing route, so a lot of people think, well, they're going to have it edited for me. But I've talked to many agents who say the same thing. They're like, you should have it professionally edited first, because if I can't read the first paragraph without catching errors, or it's boring, or you've said suddenly 3 times in the first paragraph, I'm done. I'm moving along. I have 75 other submissions I got that day to look at. So it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's things that just are flags for editors, because editors are trained in writing techniques and that sort of thing. And inexperienced writers may, like, if you haven't been through the training, you may not know that passive voice just makes so many people cringe.
Yes.
I remember having a professor in university who circled every instance of passive voice in one of my essays, and just being like, what is the problem? Why are you so annoyed with this? And now I get that once you read a lot, and editors read all day, all the time, that sort of stuff jumps out at you. So you just need to get it out of there. Even if they don't mind it, it's still going to flag that, oh, they're using adverbs, they've done some nominalization there, there's a dialogue tag, there's just things that irk editors, and so you want to get rid of all those just in case it irritates them.
Well, and that's a really good point. That was the conjunctions. I said conjunctions, but passive voice, it was pointing out to us a lot, because it's super easy to get in the trap of writing in passive voice. And it's super easy to overlook it if you're not a trained editor. So I agree 100% with you. It did point out a lot of those things. And passive voice, I think, is something that a lot of writers really, really struggle with, because sometimes it is very challenging to find a way to state something when we're so used to saying it in a particular way, which we tend to speak a lot, I think, in passive voice. And then the other thing, like showing and not telling, and or telling and not showing, and things like that. Does it, I can't remember, because this wasn't really descriptive essays, but can it identify things like that? Like, will it identify?
I mean, telling and not showing is surprisingly one of the things that's quite easy to pick up. Because if you're telling someone, if you're saying John said something angrily,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying he's angry. I mean, that you're just telling your reader he is angry.
Right.
Whereas instead, as soon as you've said that, you need to go back and say, show why he's angry. Show him chucking a plate across the room. Show him slamming doors. You know, show what he's doing that makes him angry, because that's how you really resonate with your reader. Just saying he was angry, nothing. There's nothing that doesn't make me feel anything, and it doesn't paint a picture in my head. Whereas him standing up, throwing something across the room, you know, painting a picture so that I can see it in my mind, that's much more evocative. So actually showing and telling is one of those things that we can do quite well, actually.
I agree, and it makes such better writing. It really does when you're reading it. So let's talk about ProWriting Aid again, and what the different, you have different licenses, the subscription levels. Have you changed to subscription levels now, or how?
No, what we have right now, we're considering doing that, going to a monthly subscription. But at the moment, we have a yearly subscription. You can buy for 2 years or 3 years, or you can buy a lifetime one. Some people like having a shorter term one that it doesn't automatically renew, but we tell you when it's about to run out and you can renew. And some people just like buying it up front, so they never have to worry about it again. So those are sort of your two options.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there any difference in, if you're in, you get all the same benefits, or do you have different levels of?
No. If you're in, you're in. Once you're premium, you get access to everything we've got, all of our different versions. If you buy lifetime, you get access to all of our future versions, any upgrades, anything like that. Once you're in, you're in.
That's awesome. Okay, so well, let's talk about price point, because actually I was super impressed at how inexpensive it is, especially when you consider that running your work through something like this could save you potentially thousands of dollars with an editor. So let's talk about the price points, so people are like, okay, how much do I have to invest to get this amazingness?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and you know, it's something that we talk about a lot, because one of our problems is that most of our competitors, for lack of a better word, like Grammarly and some of those ones, they're a lot more expensive than us, and we sometimes worry that it'll make us seem less valuable because we are cheaper. But actually we just want to make sure that we're accessible to everyone. We'd rather have more users at a lower price point rather than fewer users at a higher price point. Yeah, but when people are comparing us, I worry sometimes that because we are so much cheaper than the other ones, people are worried that they're not going to get what they're paying for. Yeah. But so for a year, it's $60.
60.
60, yeah.
That's a very low investment for better writing.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to make it so that nobody that wants it can't get it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's incredible. Okay, so, and then let's talk about some of the other resources that come along with this. You mentioned some of the ebooks. What else do they get with the subscription?
Well, so there's a couple of things that you also get as a premium user. We have a writing resources library, which we're really putting some resources into. Hang on, let me pull them up just so that I have it in front of me.
Sure.
So there's all of our users, free or not, get a book about the 20 editing tips from professional writers. And that's some of the key things that I was just talking about: show, don't tell, don't rely on adverbs, don't use passive voice, that sort of thing. And it relates back to the tools just to sort of help people understand how to use it. And then premium users, we have a book called Creating Legends. That's all about creating believable and relatable characters. We have one called the Novel Writing Training Plan. That's all about planning. So it's everything that you need to get in place before you start to write, which makes some people cringe, and that's fine. Some people are pantsers. They write by the seat of their pants. But I think even this, if you are a pantser, it's still good to have some things figured out and in place, that you don't lose momentum while you're trying to write. So you don't have to go back and think through things, think through your subplots, remember who's who, that sort of thing. Just having that in place before you write, I think, just helps you keep your momentum going.
Yep. I'm a pantser and I agree. I've done better once I started just a simple outline just to think through where I'm going. And of course they can always change. You can move things around, you can be flexible, but
Yeah, of course,
uh,
of course. But setting a bit of a course, you know, a
mhm.
map for yourself, I just think helps you move. And some people take that to, you know, the nth degree. You know, Scrivener users will spend months setting up all of their different documents and different images and everything for all their different characters, which great, power to them. It's not how I write, but it's how lots of people write, and that's why lots of people love, you know, tools like Scrivener that let you do that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we have, then we've got those other two books that I mentioned earlier that are coming. And then the one thing that we've just added is a webinar on that same page. We did a webinar with Jerry Jenkins, who's one of the top selling authors on Amazon, where he talks all about his self-editing techniques with Chris, who created our software. And the two of them just sort of go back and forth and talk about editing and why it's important and how it works. And of all the things we've done, it gets across how ProWritingAid can help in a really practical way.
Yeah.
So we've put that up on the website as well.
That's awesome. And we'll be doing something like that in a few months for our community, right? More when we do our next one, it'll be more like in the nuts and bolts of how to use it and all
exactly.
That stuff. So that'll be great. Stay tuned for that. That will be coming. So, okay, you mentioned, and I just want to go back and circle back to this. You mentioned the integrations with different platforms. So if you're a Scrivener user, or if you're using Word, like how does that work? Do you explain that part of the process?
I mean, the technology side of it is kind of magic to me. I don't know the nuts and bolts of that, but so if you normally write in Word, we have an add-in. So it's just a bit of software that you download, and it integrates itself into Word. So once you've done that, you have a ProWritingAid tab on the top of your Word toolbar, and it runs all the reports in there. Nice. Google Docs, similar sort of thing. It runs in a slightly different way in Google Docs, but most of the reports are there. For Mac users who like to use Word, Apple never really likes add-ins in any sort of way. They don't like to make any integrations very easy. So since we couldn't make that work, our workaround is that we've created a desktop app that's available for Mac users. And when you're in there, you can open up Word files. So you open up your Word files, edit them, save it, and then you can open it up again in Word, and all of your changes will be there.
Awesome.
And the desktop one works for Scrivener as well. So you can open up your full Scrivener project with all the different levels inside of it and do all of your editing there. And then when you open it up again in Scrivener, it'll all be there.
That's great. People who are just thinking about writing a book are probably like, what in the heck are these people talking about? Okay, you'll get there eventually. And like, oh, I know what all of this stuff is. That's okay.
And the other integration that we've just launched that we're a bit excited about is our Chrome extension. So with our Chrome extension, it means that ProWritingAid will pop up on any website where you have a little text box. So every time you're writing a tweet or writing a Gmail or writing up your emails in MailChimp, if you have an email list, anything like that, it means that our little toolbar will come along, and you can open up the full tool now while you're on any of those websites and fix your text and then close it back down and then push send. So hopefully we'll stop some of those errors going out into the world before.
Can you turn it off for Twitter? Because I'm not sure I want my tweets grammatically correct. Just kidding.
Turn it off for anything you want.
I'm just kidding. Oh my goodness. Okay, so well, let's kind of wrap this up with maybe if you have a couple of best practices or tips that you want to share, or really I leave it up to your discretion on how you want to wrap this up.
Sure. Well, you would ask me to think about any tips or points.
Yes.
And we sort of got into one, which is that you're responsible for editing your own book.
Right.
Don't send it off to anyone. Don't even send it to your beta reader, really, until you've done a good, solid self-edit. And that probably should take as long as it took for you to write it in the first place.
Woo,
need
that's
to
a
be
tall task.
prepared for that. Yeah, I think so. If you're really going to give it, maybe not as long, but you know what I mean. You need to be prepared for it to put the time in.
Yeah, I agree.
The second thing, which we sort of talked on again, was that find out the things that make editors crazy and make sure that you get them out of your manuscript before you send it to anyone, before you send it to your beta reader, before you put it on Medium or anything like that. Figure out those things and get them out of there. And then I just wanted to say, just don't let your writing get in the way of your writing. Don't try and be too fancy. Don't try and be too complicated. Use your readability scores to make sure that everyone that reads what you're reading or what you've written
It's all right.
Can I start that one again?
You go for it. I'll make sure that gets edited out.
So, the last thing I wanted to say was, don't let your writing get in the way of your writing. Don't try and be too fancy. Don't try and use words that you think sound impressive. Don't try and make anything too complex. You can use readability scores and that sort of thing to make sure that everyone's going to understand what you're trying to say easily. It'll help you break complex sentences into simpler things. It'll help you use simpler vocabulary. Anytime somebody has to stop and use a thesaurus for a word that has to look up a word that you've found in a thesaurus, you've lost them. They've come out of your world, out of your ideas, and they're thinking about your writing. They're thinking about your word choice. They're thinking about that. You want them to stay in your world that you've created.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, as you mentioned, you've got the ebook that's going up for that everyone will have access to. But we talk a lot about growing your author platform, and one of the things is getting out and writing on other people's sites and blogs. So, can you just, before we wrap it up, officially tell us what types of content you're looking for, who would be a good fit, and how you submit?
Sure. Yeah. We love having writers submit to our blog. I like really practical pieces. I like so that somebody can read it and walk away, or walk away and figure out how to actually make a change to what they've written, how to actually improve what they're doing. I like educational pieces that help people understand what passive voice is, what nominalization is, all of those sorts of things. I love how-to pieces about using writing technology. If you're a Scrivener user and you want to write about how Scrivener works into your platform, great. If you want to, any of those things, basically anything that's about writing that's going to help improve the craft of somebody who does write and help them get published, help them make a living as a writer. That's what I want.
Perfect. And I think it's important for everyone to remember that no matter how good of a writer you are, no matter how many degrees you have in literature and writing and all these kinds of things, you still need an edit.
You do. You do. No one has ever written anything super great on their very first draft. It's just never happened. Nobody does that.
Exactly. Well, thank you again so much to ProWritingAid for being our sponsor for this conference. Thank you for all the things that you've contributed to it. And the best place to find you guys, of course, is on the website, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's the best place. And thanks for letting us be part of this. I thought the summit last year was amazing. So it was an easy decision to be part of it again this year.
Thank you so much.